And joining me now to talk more about this ongoing fight in Washington, as well as her effort to improve border security in New York, is Congresswoman Kathy Hochul. Congresswoman, it's great to see you from Buffalo tonight.
Thank you, Liz. Glad to be here.
So we're getting some late word that the Senate has reached a tentative deal to end the latest fight over spending. I know you probably haven't been briefed on that, but it's just more of the same. It seems like to me you're in Buffalo and you can't vote on anything. So how is this going to work?
Well, the problem is that we never should have been sent home. I was disappointed when Speaker Boehner told us that we were going to go home without resolving the critical problem of funding for our government and also ensuring that people who are victims of disasters across this country, and this is unprecedented, the number of disasters that we're dealing with at this particular time, going home without ensuring that FEMA has enough money to take care of our people, I thought that was unconscionable. And we were all prepared on my side of the aisle to stay through the weekend and work until we got the job done, but they're in charge, and so here I am sitting in Buffalo waiting to hear word on what the next steps will be.
Yeah, and how would the likelihood is that if in fact there's an agreement in the Senate and the Senate leaders manage to broker a deal with the House leaders, that you could pass through something called a pro forma session. Could you explain what that means?
Well, we want to find out exactly what's in the deal.
Right, of course.
The Senate originally passed a bill it was bipartisan, and it had, in my judgment, sufficient money to help us with these disasters. And I think that that's where we should be at. And I'm not sure what the compromise is right now, because I didn't like the idea that for the first time in American history, we are holding up necessary, critical emergency assistance for FEMA people, or people who need FEMA assistance, and holding it up until we find $1.5 billion in offsets in our budget.
Yeah.
That's unheard of. And that is playing with people's lives, and the businesses and the farmers that are waiting for a hand to reach out to them, and they're not getting it. There's something wrong with this. So I'm not familiar with what would happen exactly in a pro forma session. I'm waiting for the details on that as well. But time is ticking. These people are waiting for help. And no matter what you think of the federal government, what its role should be, big or small, I think we all agree the one thing we have a responsibility to do is to help people in times of emergencies and disasters.
Yeah, I think also this came down to a fight over, as you mentioned, the budget offsets, and at the last minute the Republicans put in some cuts to energy policies that the Democrats have been championing, and you know, this comes at a time where there was sort of a little bit of an embarrassment for the Obama administration with that solar company that declared bankruptcy. So, I mean, how do we clean that mess up?
I think the Republicans are trying to capitalize on a unique situation in California, and if you look at the record, there are many reasons why that company ran into trouble, not the least of which is that China is beating us in this effort, our war, to be able to make sure that we're on the top of the energy game. Now, that being said, there are projects going on in 11 states, and 42,000 jobs have already been created from this program alone. And there are people and companies in the pipeline waiting for disbursements from this loan program to help alternative energy research for vehicles. So basically what they're saying is that we're going to hold relief for our very needy farmers and businesses and people who've had to deal with so much in the last couple of weeks here. That is being held hostage until we agree to cut a program that creates jobs. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure where anybody else is coming from, but I know I was sent here to help people create jobs, help create the climate for small businesses to invest, and this program does exactly that. It helps save our automotive industry, which is key up here in upstate New York and other parts of the country, and I'm not sure why we're playing games with something as important as this vehicle program, but also for assistance for our very needy people right now.
Yeah, you know, it also, again, and I know I've talked with some of your colleagues about this, we're seeing almost like a redux of the debt ceiling fight that we had over the summer, and it's just, I think it's got to be disheartening, particularly to people who are waiting for FEMA aid, to hear that FEMA found $40 million somewhere and maybe can limp across the finish line to the end of the fiscal year on Friday. That doesn't make anybody feel like they're going to get a FEMA check anytime soon.
It continues this problem we've had since July when Congress dropped the ball on the debt ceiling. Our American people have lost confidence in us, and if we can't step up to the plate and get the job done in a bipartisan way and support basically what Republicans and Democrats had supported in the Senate just a week ago, a plan that we all thought made sense, why we can't do that, it shows how incompetent this institution really is. And I had hoped that after we went back to our districts during the August recess and had town hall meetings, and I had 7 of them, and the number one thing I heard from my constituents is, would you guys get your act together and start rolling up your sleeves and getting the job done? And I was really optimistic that in a Republican district where I was hearing this message loud and clear, that Republicans across the country would hear the same message, and that we'd come back with really a renewed effort to try and win back the confidence of the American people that we lost, we squandered this summer. So coming back in September, to have this, as you said, happen again, almost the same dynamic, where we're really bringing this country and our government to the brink. We've got to stop this. It doesn't give confidence to the people, but also to the markets, our bond raters, Wall Street, and we're playing God here again, and the effect is pretty devastating.
So at some point, though, it's got to be embarrassing to say to your constituents, you know, I know that I'm trying to be pragmatic. I'm in a Republican district, as you noted, and I've got people down in Washington on both sides of the aisle, mind you, Democrats and Republicans, who are just digging in their heels. So how do you? I don't understand how you run on that kind of record. It's not your fault necessarily, but Congress is at an all-time low popularity-wise.
Well, when I heard the statistics that said that only 12% of the people approve of how Congress is doing its job, I'd like to meet that 12%, because I'm not sure, other than family and friends, who they are. Because really, I've been a student of government a long time and a public servant, and I'm proud of it. And to have landed in Washington at a time when, again, we brought this country to a financial brink of ruin by playing with this debt ceiling limit. And for the first time in history, we spoke about this before.
Yep.
Many other times we had gone through this process, raised the debt ceiling 18 times under President Reagan, 7 times under President Bush, without all this fanfare. Now, again, I'm a firm believer that there are areas in government we need to cut and pare down the size of government, be smart about it. But our economy is too fragile right now. We're still reeling from the recession of 2008. Parts of this country have not recovered whatsoever. And for us to continue that hyper-partisan environment says we're not doing the job right. So I, for one, believe that there are other like-minded, reasonable people that I'm going to reach out to and say, listen, as I've done with some of my measures and in committees already, if you stake a reasonable position, let the extremes fall by the wayside. Let's all of us on both sides of the party who believe in a reasonable middle get together and get the job done.
You know, though, it's clearly taking a toll not only on Congress but also on President Obama. I mean, we see a Siena poll out today that shows that New Yorkers in Democrat-dominated New York are actually split on whether or not they want to see him back in the White House or some sort of other Republican, whoever that person might be. I mean, doesn't that concern you with an election rolling around?
I will tell you that an election that's going to occur in November 2012 is an eternity away. So I'm not sure why anybody actually spend a dime on polls right now. If you look at the Republican polls, I mean, their front runner changes every other day. So I don't think, other than it's good fodder for talk shows, and that's great, but
yeah.
The reality is that the only poll that counts is on Election Day. I think there's been warning signals that the Democrats need to do a lot to convince people where we come from and what our values are, and starting with creating jobs, and number 2, protecting Medicare and Social Security for our seniors, and number 3, making sure our kids get a good education. We've got to keep fighting and letting people know we're the party that fights for the American dream, to make sure people can realize everything that they thought they'd be getting in this generation, and they're not. This next generation, I worry for them. So I've got a child who's 21 and one who's 22, and life is tougher for them. So I want people convinced, and that's our job, that the Democrats believe in this still, and we're not going to continue fighting. We're going to try to get the job done for the people.
So in the meantime, though, you actually are getting some things happening in Washington. The House Homeland Security Committee unanimously approved this amendment that you put forward that has to do with border security, and I know it's a big deal in Western New York. I know also in the North Country. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Right, and this is where Department of Homeland Security was setting its priorities for the upcoming years. And there was a GAO report that identified that there's 3,200 miles of border between us and Canada, and only 42 is really protected, 42 miles out of that entire stretch. Now, we are vulnerable. And what I was concerned about when I was reading these reports and seeing where the committee was going is that the main focus seemed to be on the southern border and dealing with immigration issues and the drug cartels and the arms going across the border between U.S. and Mexico. I just wanted to make sure that there was representation looking out for the northern border as well. And what my resolution did is not just identify this as a priority, but also said that we need to get our act together as well. There are many agencies that are involved in border security. Homeland Security was charged with bringing that all together under one roof, but I still think there's a lot of splintering going on, and I think I'm going to be watching this very closely, because sitting here on the border along with Louise Slaughter and Brian Higgins, we see what's going on, and we have to make sure that the resources are spent smart, not just so there's enough, we need to allocate the resources along larger parts of the border than we are right now. So that's what my amendment was all about. And I was very pleased that it was adopted in a bipartisan fashion, supported by all the Republicans, all the Democrats. And that's the kind of legislator I am. It's my second resolution or my markup getting through in Homeland Security. And I'm brand new on armed services, and we're just beginning there as well.
Well, Congresswoman, congratulations then. And I want to also thank you very much for being with us. It's great. When we reach out to you and you're available, I really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Nice talking, Liz. Take care.